Good morning, Dreamhouse Nation. James Lewis of the Dreamhouse. Joining us today is legendary comedian Bruce Baum. Bruce, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
How often do you think about Dimples?
Every time I have ice cream. In fact, her milkshake brings all the bulls to the barnyard.
Nice.
And her shake is better than mine. Matter of fact, she's one red hot chili heifer.
So for those that don't remember, Bruce used to have a friend, a sidekick named Dimples the cow, and it was so much fun. He used to do all these great videos with her. Always loved watching that on Comedy Central.
Well, thanks. As a matter of fact, if you follow me on Instagram at Bruce Baum Comic, I throw some of those up. I think I put up a couple Dimples already. So
Nice.
for people that don't know, it was kind of like Lassie, only it was a cow. She could rappel down cliffs, catch Frisbees, play volleyball. So, yeah, that was a lot of fun to shoot.
That is awesome. Now, most people know that you're a comedian, but not everybody knows that you had experience playing college football. What position did you play in college?
I was at UCLA, and I played guard. I made the team as a walk-on. I wasn't recruited anywhere. So I was the smallest guy. I say jokingly I was the smallest guy in the Pac-2, but it was the Pac-8, which, by the way, it looks like it's going to end up being the Pac-8 again. We keep losing teams. But, yeah, I was a guard, played against and tackled Lynn Swann, if I may. May I? I think I just did.
Nice.
So, yeah, it was the 1970 class. In those days, freshmen could not play varsity. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was back then Lou Alcindor, could not play varsity as a freshman. Matter of fact, I used to get my foot taped next to Bill Walton, who was on the basketball team. He couldn't play varsity. He had to play freshman first. So now freshmen, can you imagine if John Wooden could have just had one and outs? Because his freshmen were beating the varsity every year in the intramural games. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the legends that he's had go through there. I mean, gosh, that must have been a great experience being at UCLA at that time.
Yeah, and none of those guys could play as a freshman, so he would have had more national titles if Sidney Wicks, Walt Hazzard, Gail Goodrich, Lou Alcindor, if all those guys could have played as freshmen.
What was the funniest thing to ever happen to you on the field?
Well, I haven't talked about this, but I'm going to give it up now. I'm old enough that it doesn't matter. When I was in high school, they were taking team pictures for the football team, and then some of the players they took out for individual shots. So I was a lineman, and the shot that they put a football on the field, and they wanted a close-up of me diving like I was recovering a fumble. Well, normally you're wearing a helmet, but because it's pictures, my helmet was off. And I went after that ball like it was a game. I just, overshot it by maybe a foot so I could tuck it in my belly, and my nose ground into the ground. I broke my nose taking a picture.
Oh, dang.
So, yeah, it was funny. The team laughed. I laughed. My nose bled, and we went on. But my biggest injury was taking a picture.
Well, it sounds like you had a pretty healthy career then, if that's the case.
I was very lucky. I've come out of football with a bunion on my big toe on my right foot. That's it. And it doesn't even hurt. So, and that's just from pushing off in one direction over and over again.
Go in the other direction. What is your favorite moment? What was your favorite memory as a football player?
This, too, was at UCLA. I made the team as a walk-on. I did letter. I played. I got my jacket and all that. But there was, I wasn't one of the guys that was a standout or anything. I got in, but so during, you watch films like the Monday after the games, and there was a play where I was a pulling guard, and I came from one side and wiped out the linebacker that was coming through. And during the filming session, I'm sitting in the back of the room. I'm not one of the stars. The coach goes, "Who was that? Who was playing pulling guard there? That's how you do it." And I kind of sheepish. And I said, one of the other coaches, "That was Baum, sir." So that was my biggest, that was like I couldn't jump up and spike anything, but that was the fact that I got called out by the coaches in college. So that was like a moment that's kind of like warmed the cockles of my heart since then.
Nice.
If I'm allowed to say cockles.
Yeah, you can say that. So, so why do you love football, or what do you love about football?
I love the camaraderie and just working together as a team to accomplish the same goal, and just the stuff you do as a team. In high school, we used to go out to a buffet. I think it was the night before a game, and the whole team would eat together. So that was really. I originally went out for the basketball team, and it looked like I was going to. This is in high school. It looked like I was going to make it. The football coach saw me playing and said, "Why aren't you playing football?" I said, "I like basketball." And he went into the gym, talked to the coach, and I was cut like 5 minutes later. And he was standing there going, "Want to play football now?" So I kind of got into football because the coach insisted I play football.
So a little involuntarily.
I look back on it with fondness because it led to, great times in football.
So why did you transfer from UCLA to UC Davis?
Well, when I was done with my first season of football, I knew I wasn't going to be a pro. Most of the other guys on the team went pro. We had Kermit Johnson, James McAllister, Eugene Clark. We had a lot of guys that made pros. So I said, I just want to play. I'm not going to be a starter. So I transferred to UC Davis to play football. And what's weird is the first day or two I got there, at that time I was kind of like a singer-songwriter also. And my cousin and I just started doing funny little songs. And what we would do is we would like run into the library, blow a horn, everybody would stop, we would do some comedy and then run away. And and then we would write a letter to the school paper saying there's a couple guys preventing us from studying because they're running in doing comedy in the library. And then the next day we would write a letter from the student medical center saying people are coming in here with broken cheeks, and the only common denominator is that they were laughing at two guys in the library the other day. And so there was no clubs, there was nowhere to play. So we were just kind of doing guerrilla comedy. So I enjoyed that so much that I didn't go out for the team. We just started doing that, and we played intramural ball. But yeah, I went up there to play football and ended up getting into comedy.
Oh, wow. Kind of an interesting turn there.
And by the way, comedy was not a profession then. You couldn't say I'm a comedian because people would say, well, what else do you do to make a living? This is after college too. And I've said, about 2 or 3 years ago, there was a survey, and they do it every year, of the most depressed professions. And dentists for years have been coming in number one. And about 3 years ago, comedians came in number one. And I took that as a good sign. I said, at least now we're a profession. We're a depressed profession, but we went from nowhere to being a profession. So,
yeah, at least you're getting acknowledged.
Right. In a depressing way.
Yeah. And then you end up going back to UCLA to get the master's. What did you get the master's in?
Well, I got an MFA in film, and I did that because, and I took a year off between. I applied at the UCLA Film School, and I took one film class at Davis. Everybody else applying to UCLA has been making, they're little Steven Spielbergs, making films since they could walk. So I went into the head of the screenwriting department and gave him a screenplay that I had co-written with my partner at the time. And he waived all grade requirements and got me into the school off that script. So
nice.
My student films at the time, because I was playing the Comedy Store, and again, there was no road or big explosion of comedy at the time, but my student films have Robin Williams, David Letterman, Shandling, Bob Saget. So, it was a wealth of talent to draw from. They were the guys I was hanging with. And nobody at the time knew what was coming. We were kind of dancing in magic, and all of a sudden there was a big boom, which, by the way, aside from the Comedy Store, I think one of the catalysts was a show that was very big in Ohio called Make Me Laugh. And that was the show that I think catapulted things from out of the club to all over the country. So they would hire the Make Me Laugh comics, and we could plug our gigs. We only shot 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time, and we were on 5 nights a week. And up to that time, if you saw a comedian like on The Tonight Show, Merv Griffin, and you went to work the next day, you'd say, hey, did you see the guy last night on The Tonight Show? And people would go, gee, I missed it. Well, he'll be on again in a couple months. With Make Me Laugh, you could say, well, he's on again tonight. Check it out. So the thing just took off. Ohio and Michigan, it just became I played so much in Ohio, people probably thought I lived there. Cleveland, Columbus, Toledo, Warren, everywhere. So that kind of, I forgot what the question was, but did I answer it?
Yeah. No, that was a great answer. Basically, it sounds like that's what really started you into the comedy, was being able to perform in so many places.
Yeah, because the Comedy Store, you didn't know, it was pretty much The Tonight Show, Merv Griffin, that was it. And you try to get some frat gigs. There was a place here called the Mayfair Music Hall, which was owned by the owner of the Magic Castle. It was like an old English music hall, but they would hire acts that were prop acts. Myself, Gallagher, Mule Deer. So those were the only gigs. There was nothing out of town, really.
So why were you so fascinated with Marty Feldman's eyes?
Well, when Kim Carnes came out with, actually I should say, she ripped me off. I came out with Marty Feldman eyes, and she goes out and does Betty Davis eyes. But it was actually the reverse. I heard that song, and it was really before everybody was doing parodies. I think at that time, Weird Al had only had Another One Rides the Bus. So I put it together. I had some great musicians, Dick Bright from San Francisco, and Eddie Money's backup band. As a matter of fact, the original that his manager wouldn't let me release was a duet of Eddie Money and I. Now, since everybody's passed, I may take that version and slap it onto the video. Maybe I'll put that on Facebook and Instagram, is the Marty Feldman eyes. But he actually came out to see me perform it in a club and liked it. And so, yeah, I've always been a Marty Feldman fan. And he was really, even since then, you can't really redo the song because nobody's got those kind of eyes.
He was such a unique character.
It is.
So of your many TV appearances, which was your favorite?
Well, it's probably neck and neck. Make Me Laugh was a brand new experience. I did like 45 of those. And it was wild. Because, again, comedy was new. Now you go to a club, everybody has seen comedy. Nobody had really seen, especially live comedy. So there was a lot of improv and stuff. So it was a blast. It was a party. That, and I guess I'd have to group. For 4 years, I made short films for the networks. I was at Fox for 2 years, on Comic Strip Live and Sunday Comics. And the day that those shows didn't get picked up, I got a call from America's Funniest People. You want to come over to us now? So I did it for 2 years. I would either do a live sketch or a short film on all those shows. So that was a blast because it wasn't like stand-up where you kind of knew how the audience was going to react. These were all brand new bits, brand new films. So it was so exciting to watch it debut. So I would say Make Me Laugh and the short film years I did on network TV.
That is awesome. Bruce, it has been a pleasure having you on the show today. Before we let you go, where on social media, where on the web, where can our listeners find out more about you?
Okay, I've got a few spots left on Facebook. At Instagram, I'm at Bruce Baum Comic. And for the people that like hot sauce, I make an organic hot sauce called Noggin Blast, NOGGINBLAST. So if you go to nogginblast.com, and I grow everything organically, and all the ingredients are organically certified. We've got a rub, we've got ghost pepper with massive garlic, and a Serrano cherry. So you can catch me in the kitchen at nogginblast.com. And for funny stuff, I put up little short sketches all the time on Instagram and on Facebook.
That is awesome. And it's been a real pleasure having you on the show today.
It's been my pleasure.
Appliance Factory and Mattress Kingdom has products in stock and available to take home today. With 5 stores and almost 40 years in business, they are Ohio's appliance experts, and they help you to get the right product at the right price with a huge inventory. You can save 30 to 60% every day on everything from Bosch and Viking to LG, GE, and KitchenAid at unbeatable savings and in stock. Plus, Mattress Kingdom inside Appliance Factory has everything from Tempur-Pedic and Sealy, Stearns & Foster, and DreamCloud mattresses in stock. Stop by any one of Appliance Factory and Mattress Kingdom's 5 Ohio locations today or visit online at appliancefactory.com.
Good morning, Dreamhouse Nation. James Lewis of TDH. Joining us is the comedian Andy Beningo. Andy, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thanks very much for having me. Excited to be chatting with you guys.
So how did you get started in comedy?
Yeah, believe it or not, I started a long, long time ago. I started doing open mics when I was in college. It truthfully started off as just sort of a bucket list thing. I always grew up idolizing funny people like Steve Martin and Robin Williams. And so when I got to college, I just kind of wanted to try it as a bucket list thing and just got hooked immediately to it and just fell in love with making people laugh. And so just been very fortunate that I've made a career out of it.
Nice. How did growing up as a middle child affect your view on the world?
Yeah, it's I grew up with a very big family. My mom was one of 10 kids and my dad was one of 6 kids. And just had an older brother and a younger sister, and so a family was always just like an important thing in my life, and so that's really where I get a lot of my humor from is mostly just taking notes on my family. There are a couple of characters in my family, and so just it's just is always just a very warm family growing up, very nice people, and I think that kind of reflects through my comedy. I try to just talk about them and things that happen, just as being a dad and being a husband and having parents that are getting a little older and doing crazier things. So just family certainly shapes, not only me as a person, but just my comedy as well.
Nice. So in other words, your comedy comes from real life experiences, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah. I made a joke earlier where basically I don't even feel like I'm a comedian anymore as much as I am a reporter. I just kind of watch my kids and listen to kind of what they say and kind of what they do. And then a lot of times it's just, very relatable stuff. And, it seems like audiences tend to gravitate to that material. Anytime you can. I always like when people laugh, but I always love when you can kind of see people turning to each other going, hey, my kid does that, or my dad does that. When you can kind of capture, those relatable experiences, it's always, something I try to do.
Exactly. So who are some of your comedic influences?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier in the show, I loved Robin Williams growing up. I loved Steve Martin and Jerry Seinfeld. But when I was in college starting off, believe it or not, we used to get comedians that would come in and perform in the cafeteria, and there would be like maybe 30 college students or whatever. And to make a long story short, those they end up being Mike Birbiglia, Daniel Tosh, and Jim Gaffigan were some of the people that came through, before they were famous. And, now it's kind of fun to look back and see that basically they kind of go through the same thing that I do. Sometimes crowds are big, sometimes they're small, but, those people were always very, very nice to take time out of their schedules just to kind of chat to, students and, aspiring comedians like myself. So, I try doing that too for younger comics as well. You just try to talk shop and be as encouraging as you can because, it certainly can be a tough business sometimes.
Definitely. Why are you one of the most in-demand comedians working today?
That is a very good question. People might have seen my act and said, yeah, why is that? But I think it's mostly because I work clean. I think, there's still a demand for clean comedy. So I feel like I get a lot of calls for kind of corporate shows and church events and things like that are, obviously looking for humor that, isn't going to offend anybody. So, I've been very fortunate that the calendar gets pretty full and, just been lucky to be able to do what I love to do.
I agree. It's a nice change of pace because unfortunately a lot of the comedians out there nowadays are just trying to be raw and raunchy and don't find the simple comedy in life and be able to, like, for example, I love my son. He's 11, and I would love to take him to comedy shows, but most times it's like 18 or 21 and up.
Sure.
And he can't go to them. But somebody like you, we'd be able to take him, and he'd be able to listen and enjoy the jokes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a prude or anything like that. I just could never pull off dirty material, and the stuff that I find funny is more, like I said, stuff about my family and just kind of universal topics like, marriage and kids and just daily life. So that's, those were kind of the comedians I gravitated towards when I was younger and just watching people. And so that's just, how I started writing as well. And so, it's just stuff that I think is funny. And, I've luckily tapped into a market where, like I said, people want to just have an evening out, just to laugh and forget about their problems. So, anytime you can do that for not only people, but their families, or, can bring their neighbors or their grandparents or kids, it's nice when you can just give everybody an evening out,
Nice. As a clean comedian, is there any topics that you refuse to cover?
I mean, I just try to stay away from, like political and sexual humor, just because with political stuff, you're going to split the room regardless, right? You're not going to be really changing anybody's mind, especially in today's political climate. Everybody has kind of got their own opinion and kind of stick to it, right? So if you start doing kind of politics, I feel like you kind of split the room and people start getting mad one way or the other. So I try to avoid that stuff. Like I said, I just try to keep the kind of universal topics that people can kind of relate to, daily life stuff, or jokes about stuff you see on the road traveling all the time. And so, like I said, yeah, comedy to me is sort of like a vacation for people. You just give them a chance to forget about their problems, laugh a little bit, and then go back onto their daily lives. So, I try to stay away from, I guess, topics that are going to kind of ruin people's evenings.
You've been on a lot of great shows. One of my favorites, of course, is the Bob and Tom radio show. Tell us about working with that crew.
Oh, they're fantastic. I mean, that was one of my dreams as a kid to appear on that show. I listened to those guys in the mornings when I was in high school, driving to school and stuff. And I remember driving with a cousin of mine one time, and he's like, "You're going to be on that show one day." And it kind of became a pipe dream. And sort of got on the show accidentally. I was performing in Indianapolis, and Tom Griswold happened to just be watching the show and kind of saw me and liked my stuff and invited me to be on the program. And, I've been on there, every year for about 10 or 12 years now, and always treated me well. And, obviously, like I said, legendary show. They've been at it for, I think, longer than I've been alive. So it just goes, shows it's a testament to how, not only talented they are as radio hosts, but also just how they treat their guests and how they are as people.
Definitely a great organization. Yeah, I was going to say, shoot, same thing here. Grew up listening to them on the way to school, and oh my gosh, I mean, it's just a thrill to have some of the folks like you or Kostaki or Tim Bador that have been on their show. Heck, we had Allie Breen before she was one of their full-time people. So, I mean, it has just been a pleasure being able to feel like, on a similar level, not the same, because obviously they're legendary, but to be able to have those same type of folks on our show, it's just a thrill.
It's always nice. I mean, they've and don't get, cut yourself short. It's a great show, and people love you guys, and it's nice when you get programs like that either want to break comedians or introduce comedians to people who might not have necessarily heard of you before. So that was one of the nice things about Bob and Tom is they they've done it for like 30 years, introducing comics like Kostaki or even Tim Allen back in the day to kind of a national audience. So definitely owe those guys a lot.
So how is Chick McGee's Off the Air podcast different from him on the Bob and Tom show?
Yeah, I got to do Chick's podcast a while back there. It's just a little more off the air kind of stuff. It's like when you're on that program, you sometimes, you obviously get a little bit of time to chime in and do some jokes, or you talk about the news and stuff. So you really don't get a whole lot of time And so this was kind of nice about Chick's podcast is it basically is just an interview and you get to kind of chat and same thing. The audiences kind of get to know you a little bit better off of their program. And so, Chick is a super talented guy. And so it was nice to, just have an afternoon to just kind of chat with him and just kind of talk comedy and kind of goof off.
Your first album, Quiet Coyote, tell us about it. What type of topics do you cover?
Yeah, so I actually recorded that way back in, I think, 2015 or 2016. And I recorded it at my home club, which is the Ann Arbor Comedy Showcase. I might be a little biased, but I think it's the best comedy club in the country. It's just really low ceilings and the crowd's really on top of you. So the energy in that room is always just off the charts. And so, when I was thinking about doing the album, it was a no-brainer for me to do it, at my home club. But that album was basically just, at the time, it was just stuff that I was doing. So it was stuff about dating, which, was mostly material about my now wife. But we were dating at the time. And, I was a substitute teacher for a long time. So there's a lot of jokes about that. Just a couple little things about traveling and things like that. And then I recorded another album just over the quarantine called Andy Beningo's Quarantine Comedy Mixtape. Is what we called it. And it was essentially that, everything kind of shut down. And so we weren't able to do any stand-up anywhere. And, I was so sad because, I just love doing stand-up. I love making people laugh. And it was just trying to figure out a project to be honest, not to drive myself crazy, just sitting around with all this spare time, So basically what I did is I called a bunch of radio morning shows, kind of like this one and a couple of other ones, and just kind of did jokes about the pandemic and, stuff that was happening in my life with my kids and my dad. And so we just basically recorded those and just turned them into, a little album and, was trying to find different avenues to make people laugh during the quarantine, So we did a couple of sketches on YouTube and the album. And so I kind of took it as it was kind of a weird time. Obviously, a lot of my friends just, unfortunately gave up and were like, well, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to hang out. But it felt like, wow, the pandemic was really a time where people really needed laughs, So it was fun to just kind of explore different avenues. And like I said, the Zoom shows and little sketches on YouTube and stuff was, really just a way to keep busy and still try to, entertain the audience that I've been able to come up with. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So in other words, it's kind of like a compilation.
Pretty much, yeah. So we called it a mixtape because it's just really a hodgepodge of all kinds of different things. So it was a couple of conversations with my agent Bob. He's just a funny guy, and he just was like, well, a lot of people just want to hear about kind of bombing stories and road stories, and so we did a little mix of bombing stories, and then we did a mix of kind of these radio call-ins, and so the people that listen to it seem to enjoy it, and so now just kind of working on the next one, which is luckily going to be just some more stand-up again, which will be great. So I'm hoping to record maybe next year or very early 2024 for the next one. So always coming up with stuff and always trying to make people happy.
That is awesome. So where is the best place on the web, social media, for our listeners to find out more about you?
Yeah, the best thing they can do is just go to my website, just my name, AndyBeningo.com. It's BENINGO, and Beningo is his name-o. It's easy to remember it. But if you go to my website, you'll find a tour schedule where you can see kind of some upcoming show dates. But social media, you can add me on Facebook and Instagram. Both of those handles are at Bingo Comedy, and always love hearing from people that have seen the show or have seen stuff online. So feel free to shoot me a message and say hey, and hopefully people will be coming to the shows.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I was going to say, anytime you got any performances in Ohio, Kentucky, or Indiana, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to have you back on the show to talk that up, or when the new album drops, definitely just say the word, and that way our listeners at the Dream House can know more about it.
I love that. I really appreciate that so much.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us, Andy.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Appliance Factory in Mattress Kingdom has products in stock and available to take home today. With 5 stores and almost 40 years in business, they are Ohio's appliance experts, and they help you to get the right product at the right price with a huge inventory. You can save 30 to 60% every day on everything from Bosch and Viking to LG, GE, and KitchenAid at unbeatable savings and in stock. Plus, Mattress Kingdom inside Appliance Factory has everything from Tempur-Pedic and Sealy, Stearns & Foster, and DreamCloud mattresses in stock. Stop by any one of Appliance Factory and Mattress Kingdom's 5 Ohio locations today, or visit online at appliancefactory.com.
Good morning, Dreamhouse Nation. James Lewis of TDH. Joining us today is Judson Laipply. Judson, thank you for joining us today.
Well, my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
So when did you first become interested in being a professional speaker?
So my first exposure to the world of professional speaking was actually through my parents. My father was a school teacher, and my mom was an entrepreneur and grew up in a small town called Bucyrus, Ohio. She ran a screen printing, T-shirt, tuxedo rental, sign making, kind of a graphic arts, like just hodgepodge, and in her business for several years. And they got real involved in Zig Ziglar or listening to Ogmandino and some of the original kind of first go-arounds of this concept of motivational professional speaking. And so I was listening to some of that when I was younger, didn't really pay much attention to it at the middle school age, more kind of, rolled my eyes like kids do at everything at that age. And then somewhere along the lines in high school, I started absorbing a little bit more of the messaging and the concepts and some of the philosophical ideas behind what some of these people were saying. And that really drove me to say, I really like this, but then also I like being in front of people and speaking. So my first exposure was really early on, but it wasn't until graduate school that I really sat down and took a hard look at what it would take to create a business out of doing that for a living.
And then I understand one of the first experiences you had with that was the Rotary 4-way test speech contest. Tell us about that and how it changed your life for the better.
Sure. So that was probably the first time. You never know if you're good at speaking until you really do it. And I'm from a family of 5. I'm the youngest child, and psychologically, I am textbook third child syndrome. I like attention. I was seeking attention. I was kind of this look at me, look at me, look at me personality. And during high school, I would always present, and I always enjoyed presenting. In my junior year, our English teacher announces this thing called the Rotary 4-way test speech contest. And for anyone who isn't involved with Rotary in any way, it's a 4-question thing, which is essentially question 1 is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill for all involved? And will it be beneficiary to all involved? And they were running a speech contest through the English class. And if you won the high school, you went and competed at the county level. And apparently the year before, our representative from our school had done really, really well and went on to, I think, win the county and actually compete at state. So our English teacher was kind of just like, they were still in school. If anyone's interested, this person over here is really amazing, but it would be good practice for you, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I was like, well, I want to do that, and wrote a speech and practice, and I won and beat the person who had won the previous year, went on and then won again the next year, and then got to go compete at the state level. So it was kind of my first exposure to completely creating a speech and then delivering a speech and then kind of gaining my footing on my particular style of speech.
Another area where obviously speech was very important for you. I understand you were the state president of the Ohio Association of Student Councils. Tell us a little bit about that.
I was. So in high school, I was involved in a lot of different leadership opportunities, and they always had this state council. And so I went to camp my sophomore year of high school, really enjoyed the type of people I met, and really enjoyed the engagement and the learning and the growth at that age. And I became more involved within the association. And during my junior year, I had the opportunity to run for the state board. And the way that they did the elections, it was essentially you were allowed to subtly campaign. You weren't allowed to create any signs. You weren't allowed to really pass anything out, but you were allowed to go around and talk to people and do that. And then at one point in one of the mornings, before the entire 700 or 800 attendees, all the applicants or the people running had to give up and give a speech. And so I had memorized a couple of stories, wanted to do the speech kind of with no notes. And it was only a 3-minute speech, so it wasn't really, really long. And I would love to say that everybody just thought I was so amazing as they met me, but I think what really helped was my ability to give a really good speech in a short, because we only had an hour to write, practice, and then you had to give it to everybody. And so I had memorized those stories that I wanted to include and use that and walked away from the podium. And I think my style on stage really lended itself well to the appeal, because then they immediately went and voted, and whoever got the most votes got to be president for the following year. So that also gave me the opportunity to travel to other schools and other conferences and a national conference and present and speak on behalf of the Ohio Association of Student Councils.
So definitely, you love representing Ohio, it sounds like, and I understand that you have went to two major Ohio universities. You went to Bluffton University and Bowling Green, the Falcons. Tell us a little bit about your time at those places.
I did. So I kind of stayed in Ohio, and it was never even a question of whether I was going to leave or not. I just really liked Bluffton. I would play baseball through high school, and I wanted to play in college. I knew that I wouldn't be able to play at a higher level, if that makes sense. I knew enough about my own skill set to know, yes, I could probably go play in college, but I'm not going to make it my primary focus while I'm in college. And I went and visited the school called Bluffton University, where one of my friends from the previous year had gone, and he was playing baseball, and he was 100% in agreement. You can come play here. It's great. At the time in the 90s, there was a focus on athletics, but it was kind of secondary to your education. So I went to Bluffton, really enjoyed my time there, got really heavily involved in student government and other organizations, as well as played baseball, as well as, maintained my studies, and then decided I wanted to continue my education, partially because as I was developing the idea in my head, I wanted to be a speaker full time as a living. I knew that one of the things as human beings is we don't like to admit it sometimes, but we make snap judgments about people regardless of anything else. And one of the things that we sometimes have a tendency to elevate people for are advanced degrees. Somebody has a doctor in front of their name, no matter what, we automatically look at them with a little bit differentiation from somebody who doesn't have a doctorate. And so part of that was I wanted to get my master's degree to help separate me in the early stages of my career as someone who has done some research, who has done some education, and having that master's was a good call. And there was a program at Bowling Green State University that aligned with my particular area of study and the things that I really enjoyed. And that was the Recreation and Sports Management Division. So it's actually called the SMART Division, the Sports Management, Recreation, and Tourism Division, because I was a recreation management undergraduate. And what I actually studied there was how to use games and activities to teach leadership and emotional intelligence, because I'm a big fan of active learning. And if I do a training for a company or an organization, I enjoy and think it's more powerful for people to participate as they learn, as opposed to just sitting in a room and trying to absorb a lecture.
Oh, definitely. I agree. Making it more interactive, the better.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, along with that education, you have your certification in CSP. What's that mean?
So I belong to an association called the National Speakers Association, and it's the governing body. It's not really a governing body as much as it is. It's an organization that helps bring together people who speak for a living in some capacity, meaning you make your living by standing in front of a group and training or presenting or doing sales presentations. And there's a lot of different people who do a lot of different things. But one of the things we have is the certification that requires you to meet a certain level of both financial and proficiency levels. And so you apply, you go through a process, your peers evaluate you, and if you meet all the criteria and you get a high enough score on the evaluation of your actual presentation, you can earn the designation, which is called the CSP, or the Certified Speaking Professional. So it's held by about 10% of the speaking population, and it's a way for meeting planners or someone who is going to possibly hire a speaker, if they have that designation, then they know that they've already gotten kind of a seal of approval from somebody else. Because it's really easy for people to say, yeah, I'm amazing. You should totally hire me to speak to your group because I'm so awesome. But at least here, you've got some external justification to say, okay, this person at least has some proficiencies in what it is we're looking for them to do.
A lot of the speakers are able to educate, but I understand the thing that separates you from everyone else is you're able to entertain as well. Tell us how you're able to do that.
So I was in graduate school and I studied this area of psychology called emotional intelligence, which was really new in the mid 90s. And one of the things that I learned a lot about was how we as human beings retain information and what keeps our attention and how people remember things. And part of it is able to create a neurological mindset that is oftentimes wrapped around emotion. So emotion is something that fires up our brain in such a way that it often makes us pay more attention and actually leaves a longer imprint on the brain itself. I am fortunately very lucky to have had a pretty normal life, and I haven't been faced with huge amounts of tragedy, or at that point in time in my life hadn't really dealt with a lot. So I kind of went the route of humor and started studying comedy and studying how to entertain along with how to educate. Because I think we can all agree, if something is entertaining and educational, we can get the best of both worlds. If something is just entertaining, that's great, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If something is just educational, that's great, and that's totally fine. But if you combine the two of them together, I think you kind of have a win-win as far as keeping people's attention and giving them something to think about later on down the road. Because my goal when I step on stage is to give people joy in the moment, but then also to give them some food for thought, some information, some things to mill over, some things to ponder, so that maybe they can have lasting joy later on in life.
That is awesome. Now, where is the best place for the Dreamhouse Nation to contact you to book you for a speaking engagement?
My website is the best way. So my website is judsonlaipply.com, or if all else fails, you can oftentimes just type in the evolution of dance. That's something that people have a tendency to remember a little bit better, and you will be able to find me no problem that way.
Yeah, I was going to say, shoot, I owe you an apology. I almost haven't, or I almost forgot to talk about that, which obviously our listeners, that's where they know you from. Tell us what it was like to be one of the first world's celebrities in YouTube.
Well, it's funny because I imagine that some people might be like, I don't know who this guy is at all. What's he talking about? Like, he's acting like people should know who he is. I was very lucky that early in my career, along the lines of combining the entertainment aspect, a good friend of mine, a good mentor, basically said, you have to do something unique. You come up with what they call kind of an element from a performance standpoint, a piece of your time on stage that is so authentic, is so you, and in some way or another just becomes your signature. And one of my themes that I talk a lot about is change and evolution and recognizing that everything changes, but not everything evolves. And sometimes we get so wrapped up in thinking that changes are either good or bad and trying to determine whether they are, when recognizing that the world is just always moving. So I wanted to do something that highlighted things always changing, things always evolving, and not hitting on whether they're good or bad, but just demonstrating that things kind of change. And so I came up with this idea for a dance routine because I'm a fan of dancing. I'm not a professional dancer. I've never been trained in dance, but I can dance. I have some rhythm from some of my athletic ability. And I created this thing called the evolution of dance. And it is the last 60 years of dance moves all in one, at the time, 6-minute routine, which I then took a video of after performing for many, many years and uploaded it to a little tiny site at the time, which is about 10 months old, called YouTube. I needed to do that so I could get an embedding code so I could copy it into my MySpace profile. So that will tell you what's going on in 2006. And then luckily for me, it caught a spark. It aligned with people. They enjoyed it. And people started sharing the link to the YouTube video with other people. And I had, for lack of a better term, I had the first viral video on YouTube of all time. So in 2006, I was the first video to hit 25 million views, 50 million views, 100 million views. And even for a few years, I had the most watched video on YouTube till around the time that Justin Bieber hit puberty.
So, and you ended up doing a trilogy of that. Was your first one your favorite, or which one was your favorite?
So the trilogy came out. So the first one is by far my favorite. And I think it's like most things in life, the first one, the factor of newness and surprise and, not knowing what to expect is always going to trump later versions of things. The second version we created at the time, we needed to get some streaming rights and it was in 2009, and it was still kind of the wild, wild west when it came to music and internet. And so some of the publishing houses didn't want to give us the streaming rights. So I was unable to use some of the songs that I wanted to. And then the third one came around the 10th anniversary. And of the three, the first one is by far my favorite. But then when I perform live, I have a blended version. So some of the songs from the last two, especially the third one, because time has passed and it would be hypocritical of me not to continue to evolve the evolution of dance itself. And so there's an additional about 2.5 minutes on the end of the original version of when I perform it live.
And then, of course, because of how popular that was, you've kind of been incorporated into pop culture, from like Jimmy Fallon having his variations of it to being in Weezer's music video. Which is one of your favorite experiences?
Being in the Weezer music video was a lot of fun. I mean, I've always been a fan of Weezer, and so to get to go out there and both be in the video and meet them. And what's really cool about it is that video won a Grammy for Best Music Video that year. So I can, in a very roundabout way, it might be a bit of a stretch, but call myself a Grammy-winning artist.
Nice.
But that was a lot of fun. You know, to be part of pop culture is really enjoyable. When the video took off, I was kind of in this weird space of, okay, because it was brand new. The idea of something going viral was so new in 2009. You didn't really know what to expect. You know, in 2008, if somebody said, hey, I saw a video of you on the internet, you would probably be worried or concerned. Like you were afraid of, wait, who's got video footage of me and what was I doing? I don't remember. Versus now people are trying to go viral. And so to have my kind of part of my identity be cemented in a moment of pop culture is really a lot of fun. And it's something I'll always be able to have. And so one of my favorite things of all of that is I was the answer to a Jeopardy question once. So that's something that really makes me fun to have your name associated with a Jeopardy question.
That is awesome. Yeah, I was going to say that is historic. I mean, that is one of those things that, just really makes you out there in the zeitgeist of pop culture. So before we let you go, where on social media, where on the web, where can our listeners find out more about you?
One of the benefits of having a unique name is I get to pretty much own all of my own handles. So everything for me is essentially Judson, Judson, Laipply, Laipply. Instagram handle, Twitter handle, website, all of those things are essentially just Judson Laipply or JudsonLaipply.com.
That is awesome. It has been a pleasure having you on the show today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. And I'll leave everybody with my famous line, so to say, and that's life isn't always the party we'd hoped for, but while we're here, we might as well dance.
Appliance Factory in Mattress Kingdom has products in stock and available to take home today. With 5 stores and almost 40 years in business, they are Ohio's appliance experts, and they help you to get the right product at the right price with a huge inventory. You can save 30 to 60% every day on everything from Bosch and Viking to LG, GE, and KitchenAid at unbeatable savings and in stock. Plus, Mattress Kingdom inside Appliance Factory has everything from Tempur-Pedic and Sealy, Stearns & Foster, and DreamCloud mattresses in stock. Stop by any one of Appliance Factory and Mattress Kingdom's 5 Ohio locations today or visit online at appliancefactory.com.
Good morning, Dreamhouse Nation. James Lewis of the Dreamhouse. Joining us today is Steve Hofstetter. He's a nationally known comedian. Steve, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, appreciate you having me.
So how did you get started in comedy?
No other marketable job skills. I think that when you have the mouth I have, you can't have a boss. And, I got fired from 7 jobs in 2 months when I first started. And most people can't get 7 jobs in 2 months. I can lose 7 jobs in 2 months. So I kind of turned to comedy. Yeah, thanks. I turned to comedy because, if my boss fires me, I have a new boss in the next city the next day.
Yeah, because I was going to say, with being a comedian, I'm sure that made you quick-witted during the interviews to be able to say the right things to be able to get in the door. But like you said, then being a little hot-headed to say the wrong things to get out the door.
Well, I think it's less hot-headed and more not suited for corporate America. There was one job I lost because they said that I was joking around too much, and I was like, oh, heaven forbid I be charming. And so they fired me, and they said, "This is exactly what I'm talking about." I said, "Then fire me again. What are you going to do?"
So when was your first big break in comedy?
I think stand-up is a series of breaks. There's this myth of like being discovered, and it's perpetuated by people who want credit for someone else's career. Like, oh, I found them. But most people who are quote unquote discovered had been banging around for 10 years already. So, I think my first big break was the YouTube algorithm. Just, my videos started popping on YouTube, and I had one that, I was actually, I'm a big sports guy. And so I was, down in Florida for spring training. I went with a couple of buddies, and the idea was let's do enough gigs to pay for the trip. And there was one show where, a heckler interrupted. I responded in kind. I posted the video, and I was uploading it overnight. Like the hotel Wi-Fi was so terrible. I'm uploading it overnight. I know it's going to upload probably at like 3 a.m. And I turned to my buddies and I said, I think this is a good one. This might get like 10,000 views or something. And we woke up at 6:30 in the morning to drive to head out to catch a game across the state. And it had already had 50,000 views, and it just kept going.
Oh, wow.
And in 4 days, it ended up getting, I think, 3.5 million views. It was when Facebook still had trending topics, and my name was trending above the presidential candidates. This is 2016. Above the presidential candidates and the new season of Game of Thrones. So I was like, okay, this is something. And that's really the day that everything started changing.
So who are your inspirations for comedy?
So my favorite comedian of all time is Bill Hicks. And, I like to say that I aspire to be what he would have been if he didn't hate his audience, because he was fantastic, but very bitter. And so I hope to find a bit of a middle ground there. But one of my biggest heroes, and, this goes back to the sports thing, is Jackie Robinson. My dad was a huge Brooklyn Dodger fan. I grew up on stories of him. And there's this quote from him: "A life is only important in the impact it has on other lives." And, that really moved me when I was growing up. And it's something I've tried to live by.
I was going to say, with you being a big sports expert, you probably have read the book. Or already knew about it, about how he was actually a better football player than he was baseball player.
Oh yeah, he lettered in track also, I think. Like he was, a standout athlete no matter what he played. And, we're just fortunate that Branch Rickey put him into baseball.
So who's your favorite baseball team?
I am a Mets fan. Finally, this year is something to be very happy about. But it's been, being a Mets fan is living on a sine curve permanently. So it's, every 10 or 15 years we get one, but it's a rough time in between.
I know what you mean. I was going to say our listeners here in Cincinnati can totally relate. Unfortunately, the Reds have went through some rough patches as well.
Yeah, but what a weird season you guys are having. Like the first month of the season, you were on pace to be the worst team of all time, and since then, you'd be pretty good. Like it's a very bizarre, one of the slowest starts for a decent team I've ever seen. Very bizarre season.
And they also hold a no-hitter as well that they lost.
Yes, and I live in Pittsburgh now, and anytime the Pirates do anything of note, it's interesting because it's been rough. PNC is one of the greatest ballparks to go see a team lose.
So who is one of your favorite or a couple of your favorite players of all time?
Oh, that's a good question. I think in terms of people that I actually got to see play, Robin Ventura, I liked him before he came over to the Mets. And the idea of someone being like when he charged the mound against Nolan Ryan, this is one of my favorite moments in baseball because Nolan Ryan was like, I think 8 years older than him. Nolan Ryan, I think, was in his late 30s, early 40s at the time, and just put him in a headlock and noogied him. And the fact that Ventura showed up the next day, good for him, because that was very embarrassing. But I enjoyed the way he played. Good hitter, good fielder, seemingly fun in the clubhouse. I always liked him. As a Met fan, you can't help but love David Wright. And then also, non-Mets, Frank Thomas. I was during the whole "Who's better, Frank Thomas, Ken Griffey Jr." thing, and when I was in high school, I was always a big Thomas guy. I think he just, he had the stats, and he was just such a fun guy to watch.
He's another one that kind of seemed like could have been set up for a different sport, like a linebacker or something. Because oh my gosh, just how athletic and how big he is. It seems like he should have, been doing that or playing tight end or
Didn't he
something.
play football at Auburn, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly?
I believe he did. But it's just
Yeah.
interesting how certain players will choose to go one direction or another. Like Tom Brady was a catcher for the Expos at one point, and then ends up going on to win all the Super Bowls.
Yeah, I mean, Brady is one of the rare ones where could have played baseball that ended up in football. A lot of times, people who could have played both go for baseball, and I think partly is because of the contracts. Football contracts are rarely guaranteed, whereas, in baseball, once you sign a deal, doesn't matter if you leave the next day, you get hurt, you're still getting paid. And so I think a lot of people gravitate toward baseball because it's a bit more secure if you make it. The minor leagues, they treat people like peasants, and it's gross. But once you're in the majors, that minimum salary is incredible. The length of the deals, the guarantee of the deals, I think it's and it, also CTE is much less of a problem.
So who's going to be in the World Series in 2022?
Oh, look, it's hard to look at anyone in the American League other than the Yankees right now. They look so good. But I think the Mariners would be such a great story. I would love to see the Mariners make it. As a Mets fan, I can't say anyone other than the Mets. And it's not just my heart. This time it's actually my head, because they've done all this without DeGrom at all and with only a little bit of Scherzer. You put the two best pitchers in the major leagues into that rotation, and they're unstoppable. The question is, can those two guys stay healthy? Can DeGrom get healthy? If so, how are you going to win a short series against the Mets when those guys are each going twice?
So this would be kind of a rematch of the 2001 World Series or 2002, something like that?
It was 2000, and I know that offhand, not just from being a fan, but I actually used to write for the Yankees, and I wrote for the Yankees one season, and it was 2000. And the one season I was, a locker room reporter there every day, was the season that I watched my employer beat my favorite team, which was just exciting, but also painful. But it really highlighted the differences between the two teams because, you probably know this as a broadcaster, but when teams make the postseason, there's basically a post-game party every game when they're home. And the Yankees only do that for the World Series because the Yankees are like, well, if we're not in the World Series, this isn't a victory. Whereas, the Mets during the playoffs were like, yeah, let's have a party. This is great. We're happy to be here.
Exactly. I know what you mean. Just different organizations have different standards and different expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a fun quick story about the end of that season. So I left the team because I had left college to work for the team, and I decided at the end of the season that's when Major League Baseball consolidated all the websites. And so I was going to have more hours for less pay, and I decided, I'm going back to school. And so I left, and literally, I think 3 days later, some Boston Red Sox fans hacked the Yankees website and put up a bunch of porn on the front page. It was this whole big scandal. And I was so happy that I wasn't working there anymore. I got so lucky that I quit 3 days before that happened.
Yeah, I was going to say that's perfect timing. To not have to mess with all that nonsense, because I'm sure that was quite frustrating.
Oh, I would have gotten a call from Steinbrenner for sure. I avoided meeting him that whole season. There were 3 different times when I could have met him, and I just completely skipped out on the opportunity because I was like, he can't fire me if he doesn't know my name. So I'm gonna just avoid him.
Ooh, nice. Kind of a George Costanza type plan.
I literally shared an office briefly with the assistant to the traveling secretary, the guy who was the job that George Costanza was. And in total George Costanza fashion, that guy got fired mid-season for selling memorabilia. And I was like, that is such a Costanza plot line. That is perfect.
That is awesome. Now, before we let you go, we want to talk about your album, Dark Side of the Room. I just thought it was neat that when the album came out that you charged like $1 or something like that for it. I thought that was cool.
Thank you. It was a pay what you want at the time. Now it's on all the streaming services because, things are different now. But it was a pay what you want. And it's because the album before it I had released through an imprint of Sony BMG. And, I got an advance for it and it was nice. And then I never saw another dollar because, that's kind of how it works. And when people bought the album, I think I would get like, $1.10 toward my advance. And then when I sold Dark Side of the Room, even if people were paying $2 for it, hey, that's almost double what I was making before. So I made more on Dark Side of the Room in the first 2 weeks than I made ever on the album before it. And actually recently, inspired by Taylor Swift, I got my rights back for the album that I had produced before it. And so now I own my entire catalog, which is something, very few artists can say. And I'm really happy about that. So for the first time, I'm finally getting paid for the one before Dark Side.
That is awesome. So what is your current album?
So my newest special is called Secret Optimist. It's actually available for free on Amazon Prime or on YouTube. And then I just recorded another one called The Recipe that we are currently, we're taking out to market literally this week that started. So, hopefully The Recipe sells to, one of the bigger providers and we'll see. And if not, I'll just release myself again.
Sounds like a plan, Steve. Before we let you go, where on social media, where on the web, where can our listeners find out more about you?
Well, my website is stevehofstetter.com, and, all my social media is pretty much at Steve Hofstetter. But that said, we're about to announce, it's not on sale yet, but we're about to announce I'll be at the Funny Bone in Cincinnati. So,
ooh, nice.
It's the one in Liberty. I absolutely love that club. It's super fun. I perform there pretty much every year, and I'm excited to come back.
That is great. We look forward to seeing you.
Excellent. We'll see you soon.
That wraps it up for this week's show. Hope you can join us again next week for this Dream House. This has been James Lewis. Enjoy your weekend.